Tom and Ariana weren't in love. They were running a full-scale PR campaign disguised as a relationship. Tom and Ariana's relationship was the textbook definition of performative. Their partnership was less about genuine connection and more about crafting an illusion for public consumption. The extent to which they curated their image is staggering. Ariana allegedly penned fake blog posts to cement their strong couple narrative, while Tom strategically managed what remained hidden. Watching their storyline unfold in hindsight is a dizzying exercise in distinguishing reality from carefully orchestrated fiction. It is telling that if Tom's affair had involved someone outside the immediate social circle rather than Raquel, it likely would have remained secret, and the infamous Scandoval scandal would never have surfaced. He had a history of clandestine dalliances, yet only certain infidelities became fodder for public drama. This selective exposure underscores the performative nature of their partnership and casts both Tom and Ariana as masterful architects of appearances rather than authentic romantic partners. Ariana's approach to the show further confirms the meticulous curation of her persona. She selectively revealed vulnerabilities, body image struggles, sexual insecurities, mental health challenges, while carefully shielding the Scandoval affair from scrutiny. Tom, predictably, also benefited from this secrecy. His image as a likable cast member would have suffered dramatically had his infidelities been fully exposed at the time. By the later seasons of Vanderpump Rules, cast members exercised significant control over how their narratives were presented. Early seasons were chaotic and raw, but by season 11, careful image management had become the standard. Ariana's guardedness was less exceptional than many assume. It was simply the professional approach to sustaining a public brand. The result is a relationship that was thoroughly performative, with zero authentic chemistry. Their connection was less a romance and more a meticulously rehearsed brand strategy, one that required Ariana to protect the image of a perfect couple at all costs. Multiple warnings about Tom's behavior were apparently ignored or deflected on her part, revealing a willingness to prioritize perception over reality. Ariana's manipulation extended beyond her relationship with Tom. She orchestrated storylines to her advantage, from the Miami Girl narrative to subtle strategic moves affecting other cast members, like the Katie Sandwich Shop subplot. Her influence over events was so pronounced that it borders on professional-level PR strategy, all while maintaining the veneer of vulnerability and relatability. Meanwhile, Tom's conduct was consistently abhorrent, yelling at women, lying repeatedly, and behaving with a shocking lack of accountability. Yet Ariana shielded him, often speaking on his behalf when he could barely string a sentence together. In sum, their entire dynamic was a meticulously staged spectacle, a partnership designed for optics, maintained through selective disclosure, manipulation, and public performance. Genuine romance appears to have been a mere afterthought, replaced by the relentless pursuit of narrative control. Stassi didn't slap Kristen just for betrayal. She slapped her because of herpes. Yes, really. In the glittering wasteland of Vanderpump Rules, where infidelity is practically a cast requirement and emotional hygiene is an afterthought, it's almost impressive how thoroughly some storylines manage to slip beneath the radar. Case in point, the alleged reason Stassi so readily believed Jax cheated on her in season 1. Spoiler alert, it wasn't just his track record. It was the fact that he gave her an STD. Yes, the dirty dick slur flung by Britney during the Faith tape scandal wasn't just a moment of reality TV theater. It was apparently part of a long-standing reputation. Cast members have alluded to a moment prior to Stassi's iconic slap, where Kristen reportedly hissed, "You're just mad he gave you herpes and not me." Subtlety was never their strong suit. This tidbit, though largely buried beneath tequila-fueled screaming matches, reframes a lot of early season drama. Suddenly, Stassi's unwavering trust in Frank, the guy who publicly humiliated Jax with tales of Vegas pregnancies, doesn't seem so far-fetched. When your boyfriend gives you more than just commitment issues, you start taking receipts from enemies of your enemies. Tom Sandoval, never one to pass up a moment of sanctimony, also seemed aware of Jax's reputation as patient zero. His disgusted interrogation on the beach, complete with curled lip, and a nearly audible internal scream, suggests that the group wasn't just gossiping, they were tiptoeing around a health hazard. And Scandoval, always the show's resident moral barometer, when it suited him, once remarked, "Jax, you spread that shit everywhere." Hard to misinterpret that one. Fast forward to later seasons, and the refrain continues. Brittany's dirty accusation wasn't a metaphor. At the Valley Season 2 reunion, she drove the point home, once again calling out Jax's lack of hygiene, both physical and moral. And while the show never made a public health service announcement out of it, the herpes storyline was hiding in plain sight. Of course, any discussion involving sexually transmitted infections demands nuance. Let's be clear, having an STI doesn't make someone dirty. But Jax Taylor, in all his compulsive dishonesty, denial, and willingness to expose partners without disclosure, that's not about infection. It's about integrity. Or, in his case, the complete lack thereof. There is one wrinkle in the theory that raises eyebrows. If Kristen knew about Jax's STD status, why would she sleep with him, unprotected no less, and risk the same fate as Stassi? The timeline, like everything on reality TV, is conveniently fuzzy. Some speculate that by the time Kristen and Jax hooked up, Stassi and Jax were already broken up following the Vegas pregnancy incident, though producers kept up appearances for the sake of narrative cohesion. And therein lies the real brilliance of the show. While audiences were distracted by who slept with whom, the cast was playing a long game of narrative manipulation, complete with retroactive continuity. Jax's confusion over when he and Stassi actually broke up is laughable, though not surprising. Given his grasp on facts, tends to evaporate the moment cameras start rolling. Ultimately, whether the herpes reveal was deliberately swept under the rug, or simply one scandal too many for Bravo's editors to juggle, the implications are damning. The slap, the betrayal, the constant avalanche of drama, all gain new depth when viewed through this lens. This wasn't just a messy love triangle, it was a biohazard zone. And while Vanderpump Rules has never claimed to be a portrait of emotional intelligence, this plotline underscores just how much was festering beneath the glossy surface. Literally. Raquel didn't ruin her life for love. She ruined it for a man who was never going to choose her. Let's abandon the fantasy that Tom Sandoval and Raquel Levice were ever going to get away with it. The real question isn't if Ariana would have found out, it's merely how and when the truth would have come crashing down. Because it absolutely would have. There was never a version of this story where Sandoval came out looking like anything other than what he is. A man-child with a savior complex and a pathological inability to end relationships like an adult. Had Ariana not discovered the affair when she did, the unraveling was inevitable. Not because Sandoval was suddenly going to grow a conscience, but because Raquel was a walking confession waiting to happen. By the end of Season 10, she was visibly cracking, her behavior erratic, her composure slipping, and her attempts to hint at some unspoken truth, both transparent and pathetic. She was clearly heading toward a meltdown, and she was going to take him down with her. The idea that Sandoval would have eventually left Ariana to pursue a legitimate relationship with Raquel is laughable at best. He was never going to pull the trigger. Much like with Kristen, his go-to strategy is emotional sabotage. Pick enough fights, plant enough seeds of doubt, act miserable enough, and wait for the woman to do the dirty work of ending things. It's a pattern. He drags out breakups until his partner is either emotionally exhausted or pushed to the brink. It's easier that way. No accountability, just a carefully crafted narrative in which he's the misunderstood victim. And let's not forget the Raquel of it all. Young, impressionable, and just naive enough to think this affair had a future. Sandoval chose her precisely because she posed no real threat to his comfort zone. She was close to Ariana, embedded in the friend group, and willing to play the role of secret girlfriend while he crafted the next phase of his image. But once the thrill of secrecy wore off, he would have discarded her like a tired storyline. She was never the endgame, she was the scandal he thought he could spin. The transition plan was painfully obvious. Fake flirtation with Schwartz? Manufactured relationship issues with Ariana? It was textbook Scandoval, the same tricks he used with Kristen while eyeing Ariana, now recycled with Raquel in the wings. The entire season was a slow-burn PR campaign to rebrand a betrayal as a breakup. The goal? Dump Ariana quietly after filming, reframe the affair as post-breakup healing, and ride into the next season as the poor, misunderstood heartthrob who just found unexpected love. Think relationship, but more delusional. Of course, none of this factored in the glaring reality that Ariana isn't stupid, nor is she passive. She discovered the affair herself, and rather than suffer in silence or protect his reputation, she called the cameras, rallied her friends, and made sure the truth detonated publicly. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was humiliating, and it came from within the group. That's what made it unignorable. The notion that she would have turned a blind eye if the public hadn't found out is fiction. Scandoval may have banked on her staying silent, but he severely miscalculated the depth of his own cowardice and her capacity for action. In the end, the only real question is how long Scandoval thought he could keep this charade going. Maybe he envisioned a dramatic exit to Winter House, a soft launch with Raquel post-reunion, and a pivot to some ill-conceived spin-off built on the ashes of his relationship. But Ariana's discovery didn't just derail the plan, it exposed just how meticulously contrived it was. Raquel wasn't a mistake. She was part of a campaign. And the only tragedy, aside from the obvious, was that the production almost let him get away with it. Had this not imploded on camera, the season finale, with Lisa's end-of-an-era speech and the Tom's sad food truck foreshadowing, might have served as the show's quiet swan song. Instead, it became the prologue to a spectacular reckoning. Scandoval didn't just save Vanderpump Rules from cancellation, it saved it from mediocrity. And in doing so, ensured that neither Scandoval nor Raquel would ever be remembered as anything but the villains in their own half-baked love story. Tom Schwartz isn't a lovable goofball. He's Bravo's most successful failure. There's a certain art to being a grifter, an elegance in the hustle, a finesse in the fraud. Tom Schwartz, however, doesn't quite qualify. To call him a grifter would imply effort, intention, perhaps even a smidge of cunning. What we're witnessing instead is far less calculated and far more pathetic. A man-child who has failed upward with breathtaking consistency, buoyed not by merit, but by a mix of timing, mediocrity, and dimples. Let's revisit the resume, or lack thereof. Schwartz lasted approximately one shift at one of Lisa Vanderpump's restaurants before fading into the role he plays best, background decoration with a confessional mic. While others hustled for relevance, he coasted on the charm of his bumbling golly gee persona. His contribution to the Vanderpump Rules universe has been largely ornamental, a kind of sentient throw pillow tossed between scenes. And now, a podcast, naturally. After the much-hyped Schwartz and Sandys flopped into irrelevance, what's left but to join the oversaturated ranks of Bravo celebrities armed with microphones and no discernible content? It's unclear what, if anything, Schwartz has earned over the past decade, beyond a participation trophy and a few headshots from his brief modeling days. It's not that Schwartz is unintelligent. On the contrary, he seems smart enough to have done something meaningful with his life. Law school, business, literally anything requiring follow-through. But ambition requires more than potential. It requires action. And Schwartz, well, he's allergic to that. He is perhaps Bravo's least ambitious man, which is saying something. Reality TV for him wasn't a stepping stone. It was a lucky accident. A Craigslist roommate had gone rogue, and once he stumbled onto screen, he never left. This, of course, raises the eternal question: what exactly do people see in him? At BravoCon, the adoration was almost surreal. Women lined up to fawn over a man whose most consistent traits include flaking on responsibility, enabling toxic friends, and treating his wife, now ex, with all the empathy of a wet paper towel. Yet there he was, basking in the glow of pseudo-celebrity, as though any of it had been earned. To be fair, he's not pretending to be anything else. Schwartz has never postured as the driven mogul or the misunderstood genius. He is, quite simply, a lost boy with a Southern California zip code and some accidental real estate. There are whispers that he owns a few rental properties, and yes, he has a house in LA and property in Florida. Bravo's checks clearly clear. But the bar here is subterranean. Being financially afloat doesn't negate the years of passivity, the lack of spine, or the repeated emotional cowardice. Tom Schwartz isn't so much a villain as he is a cautionary tale, a walking reminder of what happens when you mistake charm for character and inertia for fate. He didn't grift his way into the spotlight, he drifted. And somehow, that might be even worse. Jax Taylor isn't just the worst person on Vanderpump Rules. He might be the most disturbing person Bravo ever hired. Rewatching the early seasons of Vanderpump Rules is like peeling back the glossy veneer of a reality TV soap opera to reveal something far more sinister and infinitely more absurd. Before Brittany entered the picture, Jax Taylor wasn't just a garden-variety liar. He was a walking cautionary tale, a pathological manipulator who inflicted chaos on anyone foolish enough to orbit his delusional little planet. And yet, somehow, the Toms, Schwartz and Scandoval, clung to him like moths to a flaming dumpster. Yes, Jax lied, constantly. But the horror isn't just in the volume of lies. It's in the ease, the frequency, the total lack of remorse. He lied about everything to everyone and still expected applause when the truth, inevitably twisted, leaked out. What's more insidious is his transactional worldview. Information is his currency. He hoards it, spends it, and weaponizes it, especially when it suits his narrative or deflects attention from his own misdeeds. But let's not pretend the Toms are innocent victims caught in his web. If Jax is the storm, they are the flood that follows. Theirs is not a friendship rooted in loyalty or love, but in mutually assured destruction. They are less a brotherhood and more a loose confederacy of opportunists, bound by shared secrets and the common goal of getting away with as much as possible. It's not that they were blind to Jax's antics, they simply recognized a kindred spirit. Birds of a feather, after all. And no, the Toms didn't need Jax's help to ruin their relationships. They've always been fully capable of doing that all on their own, with a stunning combination of self-importance, emotional immaturity, and a near-clinical inability to tell the truth. That's the real plot twist of the series, the realization that there are no heroes here, only varying degrees of dysfunction, playing out in coordinated confessionals and curated chaos. The women, too, are complicit, perhaps not always as overtly toxic, but certainly adept at surviving and thriving within this moral vacuum. It's no accident these people stay tethered to one another. They share more than screen time. They share pathology. Now, let's return to Jax, because if anyone deserves a full character dissection, it's the man himself. Dangerous isn't hyperbole here. Behind the reality TV persona is someone who, by all accounts, emotionally abused his now ex-wife Brittany for years. Allegations of financial manipulation, stealing hundreds of thousands from her, dodging taxes to the tune of over $1.5 million, only add to the portrait of a man who operates entirely outside the realm of responsibility. Post-divorce, he reportedly refused to vacate their shared home, forcing Brittany and their autistic son into a grueling shuffle through 6 different Airbnbs. He paid no child support during those early months, possibly ever, while simultaneously orchestrating narratives to undermine her credibility. The gall is astonishing, the damage permanent, and still, somehow, people rally around him. His continued presence in the social circle, and the audience's capacity to tolerate it, raises the question, what does it take to actually be exiled from this universe? In one of the more unintentionally revealing moments of the show, Scandoval once complained, "Kristen's always comparing me to Jax. How can I compete with that?" Indeed, how does one compete with the bar set 6 feet underground? The real tragedy isn't that Jax is a malignant narcissist. It's that he was never the exception, just the most obvious example. The rest of the cast, to varying degrees, display the same traits, a cocktail of narcissism, moral detachment, and an insatiable hunger for relevance. That Brittany saw the train wreck play out on television and still pursued a relationship with him defies logic. But then again, logic has never been this show's strong suit. Ultimately, Vanderpump Rules doesn't chronicle friendships or love stories. It chronicles the rise and reign of dysfunction, dressed in designer clothes and lit for maximum drama. And if nothing else, it's a stark reminder, when everyone's playing the same game, the worst among them just tends to play it best. She thought she was the main character. In reality, she was the warning sign. Raquel's transformation, or rather unmasking, by season 10 of Vanderpump Rules, is nothing short of a car crash in slow motion. Horrific, disorienting, and yet somehow impossible to look away from. In earlier seasons, she may have passed as harmlessly vapid, the kind of character reality TV casts to fill space and occasionally blink meaningfully. But by the time Scandoval detonates, she's not just on screen, she's actively derailing every frame she enters. Let's start with the eyes, wild, unblinking, and seemingly scanning for an identity. Watching Raquel is like watching someone try to remember their lines in a play they don't understand. There's a dazed quality to her presence, as though she's been dropped into the cast without the courtesy of a script. But make no mistake, she believes she's starring in her own tragicomic spin-off. The affair with Tom Sandoval seems to have granted her a delusional upgrade in status. Suddenly, she's not just in the drama, she is the drama. Unfortunately, the self-perceived glow-up manifests not as confidence, but as a jarring mix of smugness, instability, and wildly miscalculated self-importance. Raquel's attempt to reinvent herself as a quirky, edgy boss bitch flops with near-surgical precision. Every line meant to be cheeky or cool clangs to the ground with a thud. Her personality, cobbled together from Instagram captions and borrowed personas, never quite sticks. She oscillates between desperate attempts at relevance and visible emotional unraveling, leaving viewers to wonder, is this a villain origin story or a breakdown in real time? And then there's the question no one can seem to answer with a straight face. What exactly did Tom see in her? The chemistry is non-existent, the conversations are barren, and her sense of self is so porous, she seems to absorb whichever man is standing nearest. As Ariana once aptly put it, Raquel finds her identity in men. Season 10 makes this depressingly clear. Any sense of agency is buried beneath layers of wide-eyed confusion and performative rebellion. Complicating matters is the lingering aftermath of her relationship with James. It's clear that Raquel hadn't even begun to process the emotional toll of that turbulent dynamic before hurling herself headlong into yet another dysfunctional entanglement, this time with a narcissist in midlife crisis cosplay. There's no shade in acknowledging that trauma takes time to process, but what we're watching isn't healing, it's deflection dressed up as empowerment. What makes her arc in Season 10 so eerie isn't just the erratic behavior or the baffling confidence, it's the way no one around her seems truly surprised. The cast treats her breakdown and betrayal not with shock, but with a kind of weary inevitability, as though everyone had long suspected the Bambi-eyed act was exactly that, an act. At some point, Vanderpump Rules fans will have to stop pretending Raquel's spiral came out of nowhere. The clues weren't subtle. The contradictions were not hidden. Her on-screen presence has always been a cipher in search of meaning, and when the spotlight finally hit, it illuminated not a main character, but a cautionary tale. Lisa Vanderpump was sexually harassed on camera by her employee's boyfriend, and the show just moved on. In the Season 6 finale of Vanderpump Rules, Patrick Meagher reintroduces himself not just as a disappointing boyfriend, but as a full-blown caricature of smug, retrograde masculinity. From the moment he appears on screen, he launches into an inexplicable monologue about Lisa Vanderpump's backside, repeating himself like a man deeply impressed by his own mediocrity. It's not just juvenile, it's bafflingly inappropriate. This isn't a drunken slip of the tongue. This is a grown man on camera, proudly objectifying a woman twice his age in her place of business while standing next to his girlfriend. And somehow, despite the public leering, the cringeworthy boner jokes, and the blatant disrespect. Stassi ends up apologizing to him. The mental gymnastics required to arrive at that reversal are almost impressive. Almost. What exactly did this man do behind closed doors to inspire such baffling devotion? Whatever it was, one shudders to think. Those who were unfortunate enough to catch his earlier work on Cocktails with Patrick, a Cosmo radio venture, may remember his unique brand of performative arrogance. Yes, the same Patrick who once flirted with being charming, mostly because he talked fast and liked the sound of his own voice. Back then, the red flags were more faintly colored, mildly irritating, vaguely patronizing, but not yet weaponized. Fast forward to his stint on Vanderpump Rules, and any residual charm collapses under the weight of unchecked ego. The charming douche persona quickly gives way to something far more tedious, an aging radio host convinced that confidence alone can excuse crude disrespect. As for Lisa Vanderpump, she handled the situation with the poise one expects from a woman who's dealt with far worse. But the fact remains, Patrick's attempt to reduce a successful, accomplished woman to the subject of locker room humor, on her own turf no less, wasn't just tone-deaf. It was revealing. What we saw wasn't just a man being inappropriate. It was a man fully believing he could be, and should be, above reproach. That this moment didn't end his relationship with Stassi on the spot is a testament to how deeply charm can sometimes mask rot. Patrick didn't fall from grace. He was never standing on solid ground to begin with. Here's what no one's admitting about Stassi Schroeder's new show. Nearly 2 years after its initial announcement, Stassi says has finally entered production, proving that in the world of reality TV alumni, the word momentum remains entirely optional. Touted in a 2024 press release as a half-hour docu-comedy, the show promises to be endlessly relatable, utterly hysterical, and questionably sane. In other words, a slightly more self-aware version of every other unscripted series trying to dress up chaos as charm. The concept is simple enough. Stassi Schroeder, reality TV's patron saint of curated candor, is the reluctant glue holding together a cast of chaotic caricatures, all grappling with identity crises and dramatic life shifts. It's unclear whether the show is meant to be satire or sincerity served with a wink. Either way, Stassi is the central force, as she always insists on being, tasked with keeping the ensemble afloat, presumably by tossing out one-liners while everyone else spirals. To her credit, Schroeder remains one of the few reality figures whose personality isn't entirely swallowed by the performative demands of a camera. She listens, actually listens, during conversations, rather than merely waiting for her turn to shine. That alone puts her in a class above the usual suspects who mistake facial twitching for emotional range and assume every scene is a glamour reel. And yes, she's mastered the art of the deadpan quip, the meaningful pause, the raised brow at just the right moment. She knows how to talk, how to carry a scene, and, most crucially, how to suppress a feeling just as compellingly as she expresses one. Still, the real question isn't whether Stassi can carry a show. It's whether Stassi Says can offer anything beyond a rehash of personality-driven antics under the guise of reinvention. After a nearly 2-year gestation period, one would hope the result is more than a delayed excuse to get the band, or at least Katie Maloney, back together. Then again, in the reality-adjacent landscape, delayed gratification isn't a bug. It's the brand. Fame didn't change Jax Taylor. It exposed him. In the earlier seasons of Vanderpump Rules, Jax Taylor was many things. A compulsive liar, a textbook cheater, a sex addict with all the impulse control of a Labrador, and a generally terrible human being. But what he wasn't, at least not publicly, was seething with the barely contained rage that came to define him in later years. Back then, he was more of a garden-variety idiot than a full-blown angry narcissist. He lied, cheated, and self-sabotaged with the oblivious charm of someone who hadn't yet realized the cameras were recording more than just his jawline. Fast forward to the later seasons, by season 7 or 8, and the mask had not only slipped, but shattered entirely. The dumbassery remained intact, of course, But now it came with a side of simmering resentment, volatile anger, and the smug entitlement of a man who believed he'd earned his own celebrity zip code. Fame, or whatever passes for it in the Bravo universe, gave him permission to stop pretending. And he did, spectacularly. The myth of Jax as husband and father, a role he adopted with all the authenticity of a daytime soap actor, was always bound to implode. He resented it. He resented the image, the responsibility, the expectation that he might actually grow up. The all-American dream TM was nothing more than a social costume for him, one that quickly became suffocating the moment he realized there was no bottle service or ego-stroking in diaper duty. The signs were there from the beginning. In the early seasons, Stassi revealed that Jax would punch holes in her walls, hardly the behavior of a well-adjusted man, merely hiding behind a camera-friendly persona. He was always angry. He was just more disciplined about disguising it while he was still trying to win over the audience. Once he deemed himself famous enough, the gloves came off, and so did any remaining pretense of personal growth. This is not the story of a man who failed to evolve. It's the story of one who never intended to. Jax is a man at odds with the life he claimed to want. He chased the wife, the child, the house in the valley, but only because that's what he thought a grown-up version of himself should be doing. What he actually wants, and has always wanted, is to be perpetually adored, lightly employed, and surrounded by women half his age and twice as emotionally available. He wants to be the life of the party, without having to pay the emotional bill. And honestly, that would be fine, if he would just stop dragging other people into the mess. If you want to live out your days in a never-ending frat party, go for it. But spare the women you marry and the children you father from the inevitable fallout of your arrested development. Jax doesn't just resent the domestic life. He resents that it hasn't magically cured the emptiness he refuses to confront. There is a particular misery that settles into men who pretend to want the stability they were never built for. Jax Taylor is that misery in a spray tan.